Government fails, the world's off its rails, leaders are whacked, democracy is under attack. It's time to get smart, folks, time to get real. Let's cut through the crap, tell us how you feel. Let's cue the talent, let's meet the host. Podcast by George.
Hello, hi, how are you? Welcome in to another Podcast by George. We've got an old friend of Podcast by George coming back on the live line today. It's Lucas Nelson. Now, Lucas is the general manager at MedFarm, Iowa, Iowa's first manufacturer and distributor of medical cannabis, a dispensary of medical cannabis. And he's going to be talking about this task force in Iowa. And I kind of wanted to start with the big picture here post-election and talk about how well marijuana did on referendums around the country. I'll read this just briefly. Voters approved the legalization of medical cannabis in two more states, Mississippi and South Dakota. Voters legalized the possession of marijuana by adults in Arizona, Montana, New Jersey, and South Dakota. The measures in Arizona, Montana, and South Dakota each permit adults to possess and cultivate marijuana for personal use and establish a regulated retail market. In total, 15 states have now either enacted or have voted to enact adult use legislation laws, while 36 states, including Iowa, have either enacted or have voted to enact medical marijuana access laws. Well, okay, maybe I hope I got most of that right, but Lucas will clarify that a little bit. And I also wanted to talk to him about what's going on here specifically in the Heartland and in the city of Des Moines. There was some coverage this past week that you may have seen. I'll read this opening paragraph, and I kind of thought, well, this kind of seems like a dud to me. Let me see. A recommendation to make marijuana possession the lowest enforcement priority of Des Moines police needs further community input, the city manager said Monday. And I thought, community input? I said, well, maybe who's involved in this task force? Who would be on that thing? Lucas Nelson. So I turned to our friend Lucas, and Lucas, good morning. Welcome back to a Podcast by George. And I got to tell you, pal, when I saw, and you're GM, you're big there with MedFarm, Iowa, you're in meetings all the time. I'm not a big task force guy. I saw this task force thing, and I thought, oh my God, is there anything to this? Because task forces to me a lot of times really just mean lip service. Is that what we've got here or something more?
You know, I really do think we've got something more here. The group that there at the city council that is invested in this and kind of spent some time with it, they got more public comments than honestly I was expecting, and there seems to be a higher level of interest in this probably than any other time before in Des Moines. And so I think, you summarized where things have come in other parts of the country. You can sort of see the shift in the movement that is happening. Oftentimes, I've learned over the past couple of years, these small incremental steps, like establishing a task force that can make some recommendations that then can hopefully be acted upon. It seems slow. It seems, like it's not quite the giant impact that we saw in South Dakota, for instance, but at least it's headed in the right direction. Those conversations are happening, and I do expect that we'll actually see some noticeable change out of the task force work here.
Well, that wording in that first paragraph in the article from the Register that I read is key. It says making marijuana possession the lowest enforcement priority of the Des Moines police. Well, okay, I know reading deeper into this article that the police say, hey, we don't usually, that's not our priority anyway. We don't charge people with that. That's not why we arrest people normally on marijuana possession charges. But I got to tell you this, Lucas. Now, I'm an old police reporter back in the day. I used to go down to the Des Moines Police Department, and the descriptions that they always listed on the blotter for, like, most notably OWI or public intox as an example. Well, the suspect always had watery eyes, staggered gait, and slurred speech.
Mm-hmm.
And it was always in that order. I mean, I may not be right about that now after all these years, but they had a scripted description of somebody arrested for OWI or public intox. I know it came out straight out of the law books or the police academy or something like that. Everybody that's arrested for being drunk doesn't have the same symptoms. I've been drunk a lot, folks. Let me tell you. Sometimes I got slurred speech. Sometimes I staggered. Sometimes I didn't do all three in that order, but it was always that way on the blotter. And what it does, it gives them an entry point, a legal standing, a means to pursue this. It's the same way with marijuana. If it's illegal, it just the smell, the odor of marijuana can get you pulled over, and then you can get in real trouble. Hell, you can get killed, according to Black Lives Matter people, for other things. So there's real reason to make this legal so that you don't get pulled over for it to begin with.
It was really enlightening listening to so many of the community members, because I think probably like you, it's not something that I've personally experienced that much. I haven't had those types of run-ins with law enforcement, and it really just puts some perspective on exactly what it can be like for other fellow citizens that maybe have a different color of skin. It's just such a different reaction that they experience. It's such a different interaction, when they're going through that stop. And I think that was, so much of what's driving that is, let's not even get down that road, because it's not fair. There's unequal enforcement. I think the reckoning that the country's started in the summer and has continued to go through here throughout the rest of 2020. I mean, it is refreshing to see it kind of hit Des Moines and recognize that even here in our community that, I think most people probably assume is doing fairly well. There's still a lot of our fellow citizens that have these really tough interactions or just this fear that they live with. And if there's anything we can do about that, even these small steps, like what this task force is trying to do, man, it's 100% worth it.
Well, the other thing of it is, I read this article and the issues that they're dealing with, and I know you're involved in the task force. You're an expert. I'm glad that you're there. But I'm thinking, when it comes to the legal cannabis dispensary, these issues probably don't affect your customers very much, as an example. They're not smoking this stuff, number one, right? I mean, it's right. That's not how you get it, so they're not going to get pulled over for that purpose. And there's really not that kind of a legal problem with your customers, right?
No, there really isn't. And I think that's why we were so interested in participating, is that we know, of all the people who are stopped or have issues with marijuana in the state and specifically in Des Moines, there are no doubt some of them that are using marijuana because of its benefits. And we see that every day in our dispensary. And that's why it was so important for us to participate, is to say, I bet a lot of these folks don't know that this even exists, this program here. I bet they didn't know they can take a couple steps and get something legally, and they're not going to have some of these, hopefully it's going to be able to cut down, I guess I should say, on some of the concerns that, their situation might otherwise present. And, you think about some of the folks we serve here in Windsor Heights that are dealing with this incredible pain and or seizures, or just don't have a way through the day, and then this has helped them. I mean, geez, if we can help others who are maybe getting it illegally right now, and also make their situations with law enforcement a little easier to navigate, then by all means, let's do it. And so, I was glad to see that the task force recognized that there is a program here in the state, and that there's a lot of benefit to hopefully trying to spread that word about it a little bit more than, just we can do on our own.
I promoted the fact that you were going to come back on the show. I have a lot of people that are interested in what you have to say. Obviously, I got to tell you, Lucas, I know a lot of people that use cannabis. Let me tell you that. But I know a lot of people that are starting to use and have been using CBD, and they wanted to know about that. So, and I mentioned the change in the marijuana laws around the country and this task force here in Des Moines. But what about CBD?
Yeah, so, it's obviously a part of our program. Every single one of our products has CBD in it. All of them are mixed with THC in varying ratios as well. And that's still, the same typical approach to get products within this program that, I think we've talked about before, getting your card, et cetera. But it is worth noting that here in Iowa, just probably within the past week or two, the Department of Ag and I think in conjunction with the Department of Inspections and Appeals, a couple of the state agencies have released rules around consumable hemp products. And as those rules go into effect, probably I'm going to guess early 21, it's really going to open up the CBD market here. As you and many of the listeners are probably aware, we were gray in Iowa at best. I think if you take a firm reading, CBD was still illegal outside of our program. That's no longer going to be the case. And not only that, but there's a clear framework in place for what do you have to do if you want to sell it. If you want to manufacture within the state, produce CBD products, what do you have to do? If you want to just be bringing them in from manufacturers around the country, which of course there are many now, what do you have to do? And then importantly for people, for Iowans, where are you going to be able to get this? What's it going to look like? What are you going to be able to pull off of a label and know that it's been tested and safe, which is not the case today with something you may find, at a gas station or something like that. So I think by, let's say first quarter of 21, we're going to have a much more robust and honestly, our market's going to be a little bit more caught up to where some of these other states are. And I think that'll result in people being able to get CBD from more sources, but also knowing with a little bit more certainty that they're getting what they're buying.
One of my favorite musical groups from Colorado, big hit, Todd and the Monsters, their big hit was called Bittersweet. And I'm thinking of Colorado now as an example. And it is kind of bittersweet for an industry like yours. And I think of your company as an example. Right now, you're the only legal means of getting this in the state of Iowa, top quality controlled product and that type of thing. But as these laws change and it becomes more legal for consumers to use of all stripes, does that affect your future, or is your customer always going to be different than the masses?
No, I think it does. It certainly presents people with more options, and I'd be I'd be naive if I thought the ongoing black market or even these recreational markets in other states, which of course it's not legal to bring it back into Iowa, but despite that those are not all our competition. And we've got to make sure that here within this state, we're delivering products that are safe, effective, all those sorts of things. But we've also got to keep a firm kind of pulse on what's going on around the state, around the country, both at the state levels, again, with all those that are passed, and even at the national level. I think some of the results of the election we've seen here might bode well for some of these incremental changes that are going to open up a lot of opportunities for other operators for sure, but hopefully for MedFarm too, to really bring what we do so well to others certainly across the state, but hopefully across the whole country. So it's ever changing. And, I think if you step back and look at where the U.S. is headed, it's pretty clear the direction we're going.
Let's talk about that a little bit, because I'm not an incremental guy. I mean, maybe it's just because I'm too dumb to be an incrementalist, but I'm a broad strokes, take a chance. I'm a progressive kind of a guy. I go to the track. I bet big on maybe one horse and I'm done. I'm, that kind of a guy. Okay. So, when it comes to these marijuana laws, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris during the campaign they were talking about decriminalization. Well, there's something that I'm told that Joe Biden can do immediately after taking office that would be huge for your industry, which is to reschedule cannabis, marijuana. He can do that. And I tell everybody, this incrementalism thing, everybody wants to roll back and undo what Trump did. Man, we need to do that when it comes to the environment and a lot of those things. But everybody hated and was so afraid of Trump because of all the things he could do on an executive level. Well, folks, Joe Biden can do the same kind of stuff. He can do things from the executive branch, and one of them is reschedule, what is this, class 1 narcotic thing?
Schedule 1, yeah.
Yeah, talk about that.
Yeah, that's really that is at the heart of why we're in this mess that we're in when it comes to cannabis across the country, is because it remains a Schedule 1 controlled substance. The things it has in Brotherhood up there and Schedule 1 are some of the worst drugs, both recreationally and otherwise, that have ever been created in the United States. And of course, we know that is not the case. And it also comes with a designation as Class 1 that it has no benefits. And we know that's not the case. We've got proof of it, every single day right here in Des Moines. Now, that being said, descheduling it or rescheduling it even further down the list would really, really open up all sorts of avenues. I mean, you're talking about, financial institutions and banking options. You're talking about insurance coverage for patients who are buying in a medical program. You're talking about potential to be able to move across state lines in a much easier way. Really, I mean, it would become, depending on where, if it was rescheduled, it would become a lot like a pharmaceutical is right now. And if it was descheduled entirely, you could envision a situation where it's monitored and regulated, like alcohol or something like that. I hope we get there. I'm not certain it'll happen right away. Biden and his administration have probably some other things that are going to naturally become a little bit more important at the beginning here. But, he's certainly signaled, and the administration, or this incoming administration, has signaled at least that they'll go back to the way it was under President Obama, where there was a lot of sort of ignoring it, just like we're talking about with the task force, really, that at the federal level, they're going to focus on big trafficking operations, instances where maybe children are being targeted, and otherwise leave these state programs alone. Even that would be certainly a welcome posture that was not the case under the Trump administration. Who knows where it's going to end up? But I do think that if the incoming administration is able to move through some of these bigger ticket items, obviously like the coronavirus here, that gosh, I'm hoping and really wishing for a day when we can be treated as the normal industry that I think we are, and an industry that's doing a lot to help people.
My God, that's an excellent point. I bring it up every once in a while, but it doesn't come to mind often enough. The anxiety levels, the fear, the loathing with this quarantine, with this pandemic that is sweeping across Iowa now and surging in our part of the country particularly. I mean, medical cannabis is a great solution for that. And a change in these laws would go a long way towards that. And when you look kind of where we started this podcast at the election results and the referendums around the country, it looks like the only people opposed to what we're talking about are our elected representatives and the big pharma companies that fund them, and maybe some of the most fearful, regressive, nutty people in the electorate. But I can say that because it's my podcast, Lucas, and I appreciate you coming on the show once again. We're out of time. I want to give you a last word here. Anything in summary, either on the local or the national situation that you'd like to mention here in closing?
I think it remains a case where we've seen in multiple parts of the country that going out and making your voice heard still does do something. It still does effect change. We saw that in 5 states. And so if it's something that matters to people here in Iowa, then you got to do the exact same thing. Make your voice heard with those elected representatives. We've got a program that's made improvements here in the state since the governor signed that law in July, but we've obviously still got a lot more to go. And so just continuing to beat that drum of, hey, we need a better program. We need more access. It'll happen. It'll come, and we've seen perfect examples of that in other places. So let's make it happen here.
Well said, folks. That's Lucas Nelson of MedFarm, Iowa, Iowa's first manufacturer and dispensary of medical cannabis. And as always, Lucas, thanks for coming on a podcast by George.
You bet. Thanks so much for having me, George.
I'm going to wrap it up. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you like Podcast by George. If you do, like I always say here at the close of the episodes, please subscribe to us on YouTube. Follow us on Twitter. You can subscribe on iTunes. A big audience that we have on Facebook. You can easily follow us there. And, of course, pick the platform that you like the best to get the podcast by simply going to podcastbygeorge.com and picking your source. But that's going to wrap it up, folks. That's going to do it. That's all there is, and there ain't no more. That's another podcast by George.